Hey y'all. Hey. Hey everybody. It probably would have been a good idea for me to clear my throat first before I started talking. Hey, how are you? Today is, let's see, it's day 25 of our virtual book launch, and it is March the 30th, I think. Is that what today is? Yes. Y'all, March the 30th. Can you believe it? Can you believe it's almost April? It is almost April. So today is March the 30th, 2022, and it is a good day. Today is a good day. We're going to be talking about chapter 12 of the Divorcing Your Parent book. So we are steady making progress with that. I did some work with the paperback book today, so it'll be out first week in April. So that's exciting, right? Like the paperback's gonna be out soon, y'all. And so yeah, everything is going pretty well. I feel pretty good about progress that I made. Just emotionally and progress with my other projects that I have going on in relation to the book and to this mission that God has given me. So I'm just, like overall, just really good. Today was a cleaning day, so um, I had a housekeeper. I have a housekeeper, so she came over to do some cleaning. And when she comes over, I do some cleaning as well. I do some other things around the house. It's just really helpful for me to have someone who helps me out because you guys know I have like some medical conditions and stuff like that, but not that you have to have conditions in order to have a housekeeper. If you have the means and um, you want to do that, then do it, child. There's been like a little stigma, a little bit of stigma around having a housekeeper, but um, there's nothing wrong with it, sis. There's nothing wrong with it. So how are y'all doing? Like, how's your day? I know it's kind of storming today, so um, my husband's actually up keeping an eye on the weather. I'm not in the she shed tonight. I'm actually inside the house because he told me to come in. So, um, just in case it got a little too crazy outside. He's always trying to keep me safe. So I thank God for that. Um, and I'm just praying that everyone else is safe as well through these storms, both figuratively and literally, So just know that I am praying for you. I'm thinking about you, and I'm here for you. So yeah, if you have not joined my mailing list, like do it, hun. What you waiting for? So yeah, join my mailing list, opt into text messages, and we can keep in contact with each other. I can let you know what's going on book wise and things that's going on my channel and just all of that good stuff. Just know that I will never, spam you or harass you or anything like that. Y'all know I am the boundary queen, okay? Like I don't like for my boundaries to be violated, and I don't violate others. Not even message or an email list. So, but you always have the option of opting out, if you ever feel the need to do that. But yes, please do it. Join. And if you want to go ahead and get the digital download of my book, it's available on Amazon. And like I said, the paperback will be coming out in the next week. So, like, I am excited. And I hope you guys are excited too. Um, I'm anxious for you all to read it, to actually have a book in your hand, and eventually for me to sign your book. I think that's going to be awesome. Y'all know I got to get my hands ready though. Y'all know I got a little author, I got a little author writing, as some of y'all say. I got a little arthritis, so I'm about to, you know what I'm saying? I have to get my hands ready to sign all these books, honey. But I'm excited. I'm ready, and I think that God'll, touch my hands, and they'll be just fine. Okay. But yeah, let's get into this chapter 5. So you guys know we have been talking about the Divorcing Your Parent book, which is right there on the left hand side of the screen. And you see my books is right next to it. And the reason I did that is because I feel like there is a lot of similarities in the process that I have been going through in order to make sense of the childhood trauma that I experienced and the continued abuse that I witnessed and experienced into adulthood. And so um, I've just, made the decision that I wanted to divorce my father. And um, just after my digital book came out, or just before the digital book came out, I discovered this book, Divorcing a Parent. And I felt like it really just kind of fell straight from heaven in that. And I've been working the steps that are highlighted in the book. So, where we are now is on part 2 of the book, which is making the divorce final. And throughout part one, was preparing you um, for just the process of doing the deep work, like trying to figure out, like, are you making this decision out of anger, or out of self love and self preservation and to save yourself, basically. Or are you making this decision out of anger? And if that's the case, then, let's work through the anger that you're having so that you can make an informed decision that is a lasting decision that doesn't put you in more of a bad situation with someone that you need to separate from. And so, like I was saying, I feel like this is a blueprint that can be used for any toxic relationship that has that deep tie to it, that deep connection that you find is really hard to separate from. I feel like this will be really helpful in those situations. So therefore, I think that you guys know what, I never even did a sound check. So do that. Thumbs up if you can hear me just fine, please. Please and thank you. But let me go ahead and do a real quick check too, okay? Because I do want to ensure that you can hear me just fine. So in the meantime, will you please like and share the video? You can hear me just fine. Yes. Okay, you can. So I'm good on YouTube, which means I'm good on the other ones too. Yes, perfect. Okay, so um like I was saying, what was I saying? Lord help me. I've been working through the process, and I feel like that this will be something that is beneficial for anyone who is working through ties in a very toxic relationship. You guys have heard me say that I feel like a major health crisis, one of the major health crises today is toxic relationships. I truly believe that because I can see how the toxic relationship that I was part of with my father um, I feel like it was very detrimental to my health. And since severing ties with him, I've had less flare ups with my illnesses and have just had a lot less strain on me emotionally. I've had less hospital visits. And true enough, I had a procedure that was done just before I severed ties. But I feel like that the stress that was on me also caused my health to decline in a major way. And I can see how, in ways, people who are involved in these toxic relationships are having a lot of health issues. And I think that we'll see that over time is that Um, Toxic relationships are detrimental to our, I mean, like put simply, And so yeah, so I've been working through the process, and so now we are in part two, and we could just say this is like a different stage of the process, right? And this is making the divorce final. And so she starts out with chapter 5 with coping with external and internal critics. Now, I believe that this is probably the part of the process where people give up, where they're just like, I can't handle it. So I imagine a lot of people change course during this time and find this to be the most difficult time. Because what comes with criticism also is a lack of support, and sometimes that's devastating, when you sever ties with one toxic person. It's like there are other, people connected to that person, people that you're close to, other family members, other friends. And so when you're dealing with people who don't agree with your decision, who are very critical of your decision, it can cause a strain in those relationships as well. And so you're like, well, if I need to sever ties in this one relationship, but I have to sacrifice all these other relationships too, and I have to suffer, through the criticisms and the judgments and all of that, and the lack of support and the lack of understanding, because a lot of times you've told these people exactly what has happened to you, and it almost feels like, well, do you even care? If you're telling me to go back and be in this person's space again, it's like, did you even hear what I said? Did you even care about any of what I just shared with you? And that can come off as, very unempathic, and it can come off as cruel, as like a person is enabling it, and it is enabling. I mean, it really is. Um, and so that, um, there's a severing of other relationships that end up happening as well. But let's go ahead and get into chapter 5, and I'll just go ahead and start reading. Excuse me. Excuse me. Coping with external and internal critics. Having made the decision to divorce your parent is only half the battle. The other half is in sticking to your decision once the pressure is on. You will be under a lot of pressure from others to explain why you have decided to divorce your parent, and you'll be criticized, misjudged, and misunderstood for doing so. In addition, periodically you'll feel guilty and doubt whether you have made the right decision. And the next section here is how to handle pressure from others. Don't expect to be supported or understood by others when you divorce a parent. Few people can understand why you have gone to this extreme, even after you have explained it to them. You may be confronted with such questions as, why can't you just let bygones be bygones? Or, your parents are old. Can't you just be more patient with them? Or, your parents are too old to change. Why can't you just accept them for who they are? Such questions can make you feel misunderstood and criticized by the very people from whom you most need support. Friends and loved ones, however well meaning, almost always discourage adult children from divorcing their parents. They do not understand, and instead of listening so they can understand, they try to do all the talking, giving advice based on their own needs and experience. Their advice may be coming from their desire to protect either you or your parent from what they see as needless pain. However, it may only serve to confuse you further, making you feel selfish and bad for having the feelings you do, and causing you to feel even more isolated and different. Now, this next section that she goes into is dispelling the myths. Now, there are a lot of myths associated with divorcing a parent. First of all, that you can't do it. Like, they're your parents. You didn't marry them, But let's get into what she says the myths are. Who decides to divorce a spouse often gets lots of support from friends and family. Not so in the case of adult children. There is no permission given in our society to honor our feelings regarding divorcing a parent. In fact, we are inundated with messages to the contrary. You may have already heard some of the wisdom I have listed below, and you will undoubtedly hear a lot more. These statements can confuse you, make you feel guilty and selfish, and ultimately cause you to doubt yourself and your decision. For this reason, I have countered the well meaning advice of each statement that follows by dispelling the myth on which it is based. With this information, you can break out of the old belief systems. Okay, the first myth is they're your parents. Just because a person is your parents does not mean he has the right to treat you in an abusive or controlling way. And the fact that he is your parent does not mean that you may not need to divorce him just as you would anyone else in your life who caused you continual pain. The conviction that parents are always right. Now, this is her dispelling the myth, I believe. Um, Okay. The conviction that parents are always right is that every act of cruelty, whether conscious or unconscious, is an expression of their love, is deeply rooted in human beings. Wow. And you know what? We always did do that too. Even when we were like kids, it was like the boy who is like picking on you, like pulling your hair, popping your bra strap or something. He's only doing that because he likes you. And it's just like, it sends like a really crazy mixed message to people. And I can see how, like, it's easy for people, not easy, but we have created like systems where this type of characteristics, like these types of behaviors, can really thrive, and that we see like these behaviors in young people and we never check them. Instead, we excuse them. But anyway, let me keep reading. So the next myth is honor thy father and thy mother. OMG. Okay. Okay. Why isn't there a commandment to honor thy children? Or at least one to not abuse thy children? That's a good question, y'all. The notion that we must honor our parents causes many people to bury their real feelings and set aside their own needs in order to have a relationship with people they will otherwise not associate with. Parents, like anyone else, need to earn respect and honor. And honoring parents who are negative and abusive is not only impossible but extremely self abusive. Perhaps, as with anything else, honoring your parents starts with honoring ourselves. For many adult children, honoring themselves means not having anything to do with one or both of their parents. Yeah, I agree. What do y'all think about that? Because that's the big thing, and it's like especially in the Black community because we are such a religious group of people. And I mean, like even though we all have, they're all different religions, but still there is commonalities. Um, and because we're a religious group of people, um, just as a collective group, this is something that is pushed a lot in our communities. Honor thy father and thy mother. It's in the Bible. And but then it's like they just totally, you know, act like that the other scripture is not there in Ephesians that says fathers do not provoke your children to anger. So it's just like, it's just a lot of picking and choosing going on here. But okay, so the third myth is they're old or sick. Adult children of alcoholics or of abusive parents often find that their parents do not mellow with age, but continue their destructive behavior. In fact, abusive alcoholic parents often become more destructive over the years as they become even more entrenched in their denial and anger. Many people think they should excuse those who are sick or old, that somehow these people aren't responsible for their behavior. But being old or sick does not excuse abusive or controlling behavior. While being sick is certainly stressful and can bring out the worst in anyone, it is interesting to note that sometimes those who suffer the most do so graciously and without becoming abusive to others. If a person was kind and loving when she was young and healthy. She is inclined to be the same when old and sick. Those who have always been abusive only become more so when they are old and sick. Wow. And like they love to, like, my father's even used this excuse about, like, he says, I'm an old man, as to like make you put your guard down and think that he's safe because he's old. And it's just like, no, just because you're old does not equate to safe. But I think that that's definitely a myth that we have in our society. Um, and I think that a lot of nurses will, like, if there's any nurses that are listening to this video, like, tell me this, like, when you, especially like CNAs or anyone who works in a nursing home, when you're working with those older men, sometimes they are very, very nasty. And I've heard that, that there's this myth now that women are going to die alone, but it's actually men who are dying alone because they are stuck in their ways of being nasty and controlling. And once they get old, it's like their family abandons them. Like, no, we've been dealing with your abusive behavior all our lives. And now that you're old and you're still being nasty, you know, it's just, mm-mm. It's just like you'd still be subjecting yourself to abusive behavior until this person dies. And then more than likely they've like even done stuff after death, like cutting you out of their will or something like that, or leaving you with a lot of debt, and you have to, it's just like, y'all, I don't I feel differently when it comes to like parents who are aging, but they are still very, very nasty to their kids. It's just like, mm-mm. Okay, so the next myth is forgive and forget. The notion of divorcing a parent is taboo in our society. No matter how cruel or unreasonable a parent has been, the adult child is expected to be forgiving. No matter how unchanging the parent continues to be, the responsibility for change always seems to lie with on the shoulders of the adult child. And no matter how uncompromising the parent, the adult child is expected to make endless compromises in order to get along with that parent. Making peace with our parents is possible for some people, but for many others, to do so would mean not only selling themselves out, but also jeopardizing their emotional well being. Yeah, I totally agree. As discussed earlier in this book, some therapists make the mistake of encouraging all their clients to forgive and forget. What a grave disservice this is. These clients are being asked to do the impossible, and they thus end up feeling hopeless and bad. Yeah. That's why, I did a video early on and I was talking about forgiveness, and I was just like, well, what if I don't forgive? I mean, like, what if? I kind of posed the question like, people just push you to forgive. And really, people push me to forgive because I started speaking out, you know? And it's just, wait a minute, it took me years to get to this point where, I could actually speak out. And now you're telling me to shut up and forgive? Like, no. Like, no, I'm going to be heard. I'm going to say everything that I want to say. I'll forgive when I'm ready to forgive, if I'm ready to forgive, if I want to forgive. That's like how I felt about it. But I also felt convicted by that, like, man, am I wrong for this? But like, that's how I truly felt. So it's like I would be denying myself my own feelings if I was to, allow people's pressures to dictate my feelings. But okay, so I'm going to continue reading. Many people will criticize your decision to divorce a parent because they believe you should be able to forgive. They may hear such messages as this: God taught us to forgive. If Jesus could forgive our sins, why can't you forgive your mother or father? Have you never done anything you needed to be forgiven for? Are you perfect? Who are you to judge? Exactly. We've heard all of the above. Sonia would sink into a deep depression every time her husband's family would lecture her about forgiving her father. She believed strongly in forgiveness because she was deeply religious, but in her heart, she knew she just wasn't ready to forgive. She was still too angry at her alcoholic father, who had beaten her mercilessly when she was a child, and who continued to drink and to abuse her mother. She felt guilty for not being able to forgive, for not being more spiritual and magnanimous. Don't let others make you feel guilty because you haven't forgiven your parent. There is no shame in forgiving. Few people ever really complete the task, even when they want to. And for many, forgiving can just be a way of denying and pretending that nothing ever happened. And that causes a lot of mental illness, y'all. You know, it really does. Okay, so the next myth is that's just the way they are. Why can't you just accept them? I know we've heard this too. Okay, so it reads like this. Just because we know that a parent has always acted in a certain way doesn't mean that we have to accept it. Abusive behavior is never acceptable, no matter whose behavior it is, why he or she behaves this way, or how long the behavior has been going on. Y'all, and don't we give like the alibi of like mental illness, of hurt people, you know, he was hurt so or she was hurt so they're hurting, like it's just like we give abusers alibi after alibi after alibi, but victims of abusers, we don't even give them the alibi of they can't forgive yet, you know what I'm saying? Like we don't even, we give them no grace at all, you know. It's crazy to me. Okay, then the next myth is, but your parent is such a wonderful person. Oh geez. It is difficult enough to divorce a parent even when others recognize that the parent is cruel, selfish, or abusive. But when the parent is successful at putting up a facade to the outside world, it makes divorcing that parent especially difficult. Very often, I hear clients say, people can't understand why I would want to divorce my mother. Most people think she's a wonderful person. She's always the first one to help those in need, and she's so charming. People just love her. How can they possibly understand how cruel and ungiving she is to her own family? Wow, I can totally relate. I can totally relate. Mm. Okay. While it is important to make such, while it is important to make sure you aren't seeing your parent as all bad, recognize that your parent may been so successful, have been so successful at hiding her bad side from the outside world that others outside the family may have a hard time seeing your parent as anything but all good. Yeah, yeah, I can see that. Okay, the next section is how to deal with the criticism. Okay. Many of your family members and friends will simply not understand what you are doing and will try to talk you out of divorcing your parent for your own good. Others, and this is in quote, for your own good. Okay. Others may be more overtly critical, strongly reprimanding you for taking such action. Even if you feel you have to divorce a parent for your very survival, you may be criticized and judged harshly. Those who do not come from dysfunctional families often cannot understand the agony some adult children go through in trying to come to terms with their parents and coping with their ongoing destructive behavior. These adult children are frequently judged and criticized by people who have had totally different experiences growing up and who see them as simply ungrateful, selfish, stubborn, or lacking in respect. Some criticism will come from unexpected places, places from which you might expect support. A good example is this a good example of this is the kind of criticism many experience from their peers in 12-step recovery programs. AA teaches forgiveness and strongly encourages members to understand that victims as well, that they did not intentionally try to hurt their children, but were acting out of their own hurt and disturbance. Clients of mine have spoken with AA friends about divorcing their parents, have sometimes been sharply criticized for not being forgiving and for judging. You may find that outright criticism may not hurt as much as excuse me. You may find that outright criticism may not hurt as much as insinuation and subtle denigration, which can cause you to doubt yourself and become confused. With practice, you can learn to anticipate these put downs and find tactful yet effective ways of dealing with them. In order to help prepare you for this, I have made the following list of some of the subtle criticisms you are likely to hear, along with some suggestions for how to respond. Okay, here's one, y'all. Here's one of the criticisms. You should try to understand that your parent was abused and mistreated by her own parents. Okay, and this is a possible response. Yes, my parents, sorry, y'all. Yes, my parent probably was abused by her parents, and she in turn perpetuated the cycle of abuse by being abusive to me. This is precisely why I need to divorce myself from her. I need to break the cycle of abuse. And the only way I found it to be possible is to not be around her. When I'm around my mother, she continues to abuse me, and in turn I tend to be either abusive to others or to myself. Understanding why she was abusive doesn't take away the pain and damage she has inflicted on me, nor does it excuse her behavior. That's a good response, y'all. What do y'all think? I think that's a good response because it acknowledges, what your parent has been through. It's not like you're saying, well, so what? It acknowledges their pain, but it also acknowledges yours. And it speaks to the need for there to be um, something that actually stops the pattern from continuing. So I think this is a really good response. Okay, the next criticism is stop judging her. She did the best she could. And a possible response is my parent is the only one who truly knows whether she did the best she could. It is not for me to judge. Whether she did the best she could based on her history and limitations is not the issue here. The real issue is that whether it was her best or not, it was not good enough. I do not deserve the kind of treatment I have received from her, and I do not have to put up with it. That's good. That's a good strong statement too. Because I mean, you really know. Like, how do you really know if a person did the best they could? And it's just like just because they did doesn't mean that that was their best. And if it was their best, it's like okay, well, their best wasn't good enough. Um, their best was damaging to me. So I have to do best for me now and separate myself from them. Like, I think that's a really good response. Okay, so the next one is no parent is perfect. How would you like if your children divorced you? And your response can be if I treated my own children the way I've been treated, they would have the right to their anger. I hope I would be a big enough person to listen to their anger and take responsibility for my actions. Oh, okay. That's it then. Look, that's short and sweet. And that's what I was saying too. Um, it's almost as if because people give my father an alibi, does that then mean I have an alibi to use my own children? And I don't think that people really think about that. They don't think about giving an excuse here would also mean that you'd have to give an excuse here, and then you'd have to continue giving an excuse. So then my children could abuse theirs and theirs and theirs, and it just keeps going. So it's like, where does it end if it doesn't end? Nothing changes if nothing changes. So it's like, you can continue these excuses, but if it just continues the perpetuation of the cycle, then, it has to stop somewhere. The next one is it happened a long ago. Why can't you leave it all behind you and get on with your life? Stop living in the past. And a possible response could be I'm trying to go on with my life, and the best way for me to do this is to divorce myself from a parent who has damaged my childhood and continues to upset and hurt me today. It's hard to live in the past when your parent is still being as abusive, critical, and neglectful as he was when I was a child. I am hoping that by not being around my parent, I won't be constantly reminded of my past. and that I have a chance to heal, and that I can begin my life anew. I like this, y'all. These are really good responses. And in no way does it even attack the person who made this, the criticizing statement, It doesn't attack them. It just, states your place, You stand strong on your convictions and your beliefs, and that it is what it is. I like it. Okay, let me continue reading. Sometimes it is best to Sometimes it is best not to tell others about divorcing a parent, as Roxanne learned. Okay, this is what Roxanne said. Whenever I've talked about divorcing my parent in the past, I felt extremely defensive. I'm sure it's because right away people who don't understand attack me verbally, as though I've done something to hurt them. The most famous lines are, "How could you do that to your own flesh and blood?" And "How could you do that to your poor mother?" So I've learned to keep it to myself unless someone asks. Then I'm as honest as I can be, as long as I can also protect myself in the process. The expectations, of course, have been those who know me and understand the hell I've been through with my family. Yeah, wow. Yeah, I would imagine so. Sometimes you have to keep it to yourself. And I had been thinking about for actually a couple years. I want to say I mentioned it to my son's aunt, and she didn't judge me either. She really just was really neutral, to be honest with you. Like, I mean, she had no response either way. She just listened, and I think that was really really effective and really good for me, because it was like, these are the ideas that I'm having. This is what I feel like God is telling me. This is where I feel like the direction that I need to go for my own, health and safety. And I told her that, and she just listened. And I think that's really an effective way of even, being a friend and being a support system throughout this process. And sometimes you just have to just not say anything and just listen, just be there to listen. And sometimes that's all the support a person needs. Oftentimes we've been silenced. Um, and so when we finally able to articulate our thoughts and just actually, you know, release them from our body, it provides a lot of clarity. Clarity that we're not asking someone else to give us. It's just clarity that we need to come to by expressing ourselves. And so I like these responses, because sometimes you don't have a choice but to respond. You have to pretty much say something, you know, unless you decide to keep it to yourself like Roxanne did, which is also an effective way. Okay, so excuse me. The next part is telling your family. Oh Lord. Let's see what the author has to say. And just a reminder, the author is Beverly Engel. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist. Hold on, you guys. Excuse me. And she wrote this book in 1990, and updated it. Well, it went out of print, so it went back into print in 2014. And so here I am in 2022, reading through these, reading through these suggestions and the steps and the stories, and all of this stuff is still relevant today. I can relate to the stories that these people shared, um, when they went through this process too. And I discovered last night when I was reading the end of end of chapter 4, that the author was 41 years old when she divorced her mother. And here I am, 41 years old, divorcing my father. So I just think that there's a lot of similarities between her story and mine, and the stories that she shared within the book, that really lead me to believe that this is um, a step that God approves of, because ultimately that's what matters to me. It's like, do I still feel good in my spirit about the decision that I've made? So that's, I feel like this book is really really a godsend. Okay, so let's get into telling your family. It will be very important for you to tell the rest of your immediate family about your intentions to divorce one or both of your parents. They have the right to know, but more important, you have the right to have your intention honored. If you are emotionally divorcing a parent but agreeing to still see him at family gatherings, it won't be as important to let your siblings and other family members know about the divorce. But if you are going to physically divorce your parent as well, you need to make that clear to your family. You can go into as much or as little detail as you want, but the important thing is that you make it clear that you do not wish to be around your parent. For example, your family members will need to know that if they invite your parent to a function, they need not invite you because you will not attend if your parent is there. They will need to plan on entertaining you separately from your parent. And as I've mentioned, family members will often be critical of your decision and will try to reason with you or talk you out of it. Often, individual family members will side with the parent you are divorcing and may in turn divorce you. This happens most often with the parent you are not divorcing. You may choose to side with um, she may choose to side with her mate no matter what he has done. You probably won't be surprised if this happens. Anyway, since most adult children realize that their parents have banded together in their denial, in some cases, an adult children's entire family will turn against her when she tells them that she is divorcing her parent. Wow, that's devastating, y'all. But you know what was crazy about my story is that because my father isolated me from a lot of family anyway growing up, it really was not like that big of a deal, because it's like, okay, well, what if my family doesn't want to talk to me anymore? It's like we really barely talk anyway, and I barely even know them anyway, so it's like I really don't care anyway. So it wasn't that bad for me. Um, But as far as like immediate family, like there has been relationships that have been severed, as a result of me severing ties with my father as well. And that just is what it is. That's just what happens. But it's really good to prepare yourself for that. So that you're not shocked by it. And a lot of times family will try to set you up, to have meetings or to invite you to functions together, or maybe not tell you. And you have to make that clear to them. You have to make your boundaries clear that do not invite me. If you've invited this person, do not try to set me up. Do not try to do these chance meetings where you invite that person, don't tell me. And you know I had to make that clear in the beginning too, because there was an instant where that could have happened. And so I just said, look, don't try to set me up. If you want to meet with me, then you meet, and then it'll just be us. Do not try to set me up, and my father's there. And I know that he is always armed. I know what I'm saying? I know he's violent, and I don't want to be in the same space as he's in. So don't put me in that position. Have to sometimes make that really clear to your family. Sometimes they don't understand, and what ends up happening is these people actually act out those acts of violence. They'll actually kill you, um, and it'll be your family that actually sets you up for the meeting. And you got to make that clear. So the next section is when siblings view you as the enemy. And gosh, I've had this done. My brother pretty much, I think at one point he pretty much thought I was a devil. Anyway, like I was letting the devil use me. It's just like, child, bye. Okay, when siblings view you as the enemy, it is more than likely that everyone else in your family has also been damaged by the parent you wish to divorce and by the dysfunctional family system. Nevertheless, others may be in far more denial about how they have been affected than you have ever been. Unless there is one child in the family who seems to be the one to stand up and confront the abuse, neglect, and alcoholism in the family. Siblings often accuse this person of being disloyal to the parent, of making trouble, of refusing to let bygones be bygones, and of constantly harping about the past. They may see her as the crazy, neurotic, or troubled one. Yet, ironically, this child is often the healthiest and strongest one of all. She is the one who has had the courage to face the truth about the family, to seek professional help for her problems, and to confront her abusers. Y'all, she talking about me right here. She is talking about me. Like, yes, I could totally write this in my bio. And probably some of y'all too, because y'all stood up and you were the ones who like stood up against it. And but they feel that you're the crazy one for it, and you're like, no, I'm probably the healthiest one of all of us. Okay. Ultimately, she is the one who has had so much determination to recover from her childhood that she is willing to do anything that will help her to heal and flourish, including divorcing herself from a parent. Y'all, this is my bio right here. I could totally just tweak this and it be my bio. I'm gonna read it one more time because I feel like this is a few of us. No, this is like probably most of you on my channel are like this, except for the ones who are just watching me because because you guys know my father be watching my channel, but maybe he'll learn something. Okay, it is, and I'm gonna read this paragraph again, okay, because I know this describes a lot of us. Okay, it is more than likely that everyone else in your family has also been damaged by the parent you wish to divorce and by the dysfunctional family system. Nevertheless, others may be in far more denial about how they have been affected than you have ever been. Usually, there is one child in the family who seems to be the one to stand up and confront the abuse, neglect, or alcoholism in the family. Siblings often accuse this person of being disloyal to the parent, of making trouble, of refusing to let bygones be bygones, and of constantly harping about the past. They may see her as crazy, neurotic, or troubled one. Yet, ironically, this child is often the healthiest and strongest one of all. She is the one who has had the courage to face the truth about the family, to seek professional help for her problems, and to confront her abusers. Ultimately, she is the one who has so much determination to recover from her childhood that she is willing to do anything that will help her to heal and flourish, including divorcing herself from a parent. Y'all, that's deep. That's deep, and that's most of us. Okay, let's keep reading. Siblings can unfortunately be the least supportive of anyone. They may be so threatened by your attempts to recover and by the truths that you are uncovering that they actually view you as the enemy. You are taking away their illusions, causing them to doubt their perceptions, threatening to yank them out of their denial. They simply can't afford to listen to you, to take in what you have to say. They can't believe you when you tell them what your parent has done to hurt you and damage you, because then they would have to face the damage that has been done to them. Yeah, this is my brother. Even a sibling who you know for certain was also abused by your parent may deny her own abuse and become angry at you for accusing your parent. The fact that you may have actually witnessed the abuse or that she may have previously confided in you about being abused by the parent will bear no weight. Yep. Yep. And that's hard, y'all. That is really hard because it's like, wait a minute, we were in the same house. We experienced the same thing. We witnessed the same stuff, and probably you witnessed more because you're older than me and because you're a male. It just makes it really hard to digest that. It's like my brother actually said my father is a hero. And I'm just like, where? To who? How? It just I can't it's just not that don't make sense. Don't make sense. It don't add up. The math ain't mapping, okay? Let me keep reading. In addition to denial, siblings may have entirely different perceptions about the family in their childhood, even though they did indeed experience the very same things you did: emotional, verbal, physical, or sexual abuse. They may have perceived the situation very differently. This may be so because they played a different role in the family or developed a different way of coping with the family problems. In addition, your birth order may also have affected your perceptions of the family. Abusive or alcoholic parents can become progressively worse, causing younger children to suffer much more severely than older ones. Or the reverse can be true. For example, when a parent stops drinking, seeks help for her problem, or has a religious conversion, she may end up treating the younger children better. Sometimes parents favor one child over another or dislike one child more than the others. Any of these variables can contribute to different perceptions among siblings of what their childhood was like. Yeah, this is to know, because it also gives you a lot of perspective into other people who are involved in this, this tangled web. So let's continue reading. Sometimes siblings feel so guilty about the way your parent treated you that they simply cannot relate to you. Your siblings may feel guilty because he failed to protect you from your parent or because he didn't tell someone about what was happening to you. Oh. Some even feel guilty because they knew you were being abused but secretly felt relieved that it wasn't them. Oh wow. I wonder if that's my brother cuz he was older than me. I often felt like he was weak, because he didn't like step up for stuff. Um he didn't use his voice at all. Hmm. That's interesting though. It is also important to realize that your siblings may still be terribly afraid of your parent and therefore unable to support you. Keep in mind how long it has taken you to break away from your parent, how hard you have had to work to get over your fears of him. If your siblings have not received any help in the form of therapy or 12-step programs, they are probably just not equipped to face your parents' rage. Even though they are adults, they may still be so hooked into your parent, so afraid of his rage, that they cannot support you for fear of making your parent angry with them. For whatever reason, your siblings may not only be unsupportive of your decision to divorce your parent, but may also perceive it as an insult or a threat to them. They may attack you, perhaps even threatening to divorce you unless you reconsider. As unfortunate as it would be to lose a sibling along with losing a parent, don't let yourself be blackmailed. Do what is right for you and hope that your sibling will eventually come around to your way of thinking or at least become tolerant of your position. Wow, that's deep, y'all. That is really deep. Hmm. Okay, don't let yourselves be blackmailed, y'all. Okay, so the next section is telling your children. Can y'all see how this book is like really, really helpful in just um going through these steps? It seems like it really prepares you. So then by the time we get to the book and it's like, you're you've actively made the actively cut your parent off. It's like you've been properly prepared for it. And so you can handle the emotional weight of it all. um okay, so telling your children. You will need to tell your children about your intention to divorce your parent. Children are naturally very perceptive, and they have probably already sensed that something is going on with you. You have very likely been acting angry or distracted, and they may have overheard conversations you have had with your parent or with others. Children often assume that whatever is wrong with their parent is their fault. So you need to explain what is going on so they won't blame themselves for your unhappiness. It is also important to tell your children why you are discontinuing their visits with their grandparent. Because by not telling them, you are protecting the abuser and reinforcing secrecy as a family pattern. Ah. And see, I think that a lot of people may think, okay, I'm protecting my child by not saying, by not telling them what's going on, But I can see how this also enables the abuser, protects the abuser, um, it helps them to save face, and it reinforces the pattern of secrecy within the family. That makes a lot of sense. It does. So, what do y'all think? Like, is that making sense to y'all? It It truly does to me. Okay, let's continue reading. Again, tell them only as much as you feel comfortable with. Some people feel that their children should know the reasons for the divorce, while others think it is necessary only to tell them that the divorce has occurred. If your parent was sexually abusive to you, and one of the reasons you are divorcing him is to protect your children from being abused by him, it might be important to tell your child her grandparents' abusive nature in order to further protect her. It is especially true if you are going to allow your child to continue seeing her grandparent. Hmm. Okay. I always found it a little weird. Not weird. Like I understand it, but it is still weird at the same time. How people can be abused by their parent and but then allow their child to um, you know, have allow the grandparent to have the same access to their child, to the grandchild. And it just is like, but you already know, you already know what this person has done, what they're capable of. So then why would you then put your child in that position? And I think that there's a lot of denial that has to do with that. But regardless of what the reasoning is, you subjected your child to the same abuse, not worse. Okay, let's continue reading. If you tell your child about your own sexual abuse, be careful to talk to her in ways that is appropriate to her age. If your child is under 8 years old, you do not need to go into detailed descriptions. Instead, tell her in a general way what happened to you. For example, you might say, "My father hurt me when I was a little girl. I'm afraid he might hurt you in the same way. So I have decided that we should stop seeing him. That is why we are not going over to his house anymore. And that is why I have been crying. If I seem sad, it doesn't have anything to do with you." Aw. I gotta plug my phone into the charger. 15% battery. So this may sound a little different. I have my headphones in. A quick check. I feel like this is. Uh-oh. Sorry about that, y'all. Oh, thank you, sweetheart. Good night. I love you. She knows who she is. Um, Let me do a quick check and make sure y'all can still hear me good. Yeah. Um, okay. I just wanted to make sure because I had to plug my phone up to the charger. Okay. Where am I? Okay. She was talking to someone 8 years old. Okay. She said that is why we're not going over to his house anymore, and that is why I've been crying. If I seem sad, it doesn't have anything to do with you. If your child wants to know more, she will ask. She may ask you, "How did he hurt you?" In that case, you may want to go into more detail, gearing your answer to your child's age. You may want to just say, "He touched my private parts," or "He got really angry and hit me." If your teenager asks, "What did grandfather do that was so terrible?" you might say, "He raped me," or "He used to physically abuse me." In general, just provide the information you feel your children need in order for them to understand what is going on and to be protected. Answer their questions honestly, but don't overwhelm them with aspects of the abuse they might not be able to deal with. By all means, Make sure you don't use them as a place to dump all your feelings about your parent. Mm, that's good stuff. So I think like that also has a tendency to happen. We start to confide in our children, especially because it's like if you've been, isolated or kind of ostracized from the rest of your family, then you may have a tendency to want to just do a dump, of your emotions and your feelings and all of that. But to dump those on your children are not necessarily, the best way to go. So that's good stuff, you guys. I feel like this book is really good. Okay. If you are not ready to go into detail about what your parent did or why you want to divorce him, be honest about it. Say that you are not comfortable yet in talking about it, but that perhaps when your child is older or when you become more comfortable with your feelings, you will be able to explain exactly what happened. Even if your children are adults, it is still important to tell them about the divorce and the reasons for it. Don't expect them to be supportive of your decision, even understanding about your pain. Remember, you are talking about their grandparent, someone they probably love very much. If your children don't want to hear any more about your abuse or about the truth of their grandparent, don't force them to. It will take them some time for them to assimilate to what you have told them. Wow. See, that's good stuff, you guys. It allows you to realize that, your children, um, first of all, that they can understand things. They can understand, when you're honest and you're transparent with them. But, it has to be appropriate to their age and to the situation. Um, so you have to use your discernment and your knowledge in that area. But I have an adult son as well. And of course, I don't have to deal with the issue of, you know, um him being in denial or wanting to still be around my father. But um so I can't really say how that would make me feel. But I would definitely say that it's good to know that that may be a possibility in some cases. That you have adult children who don't want to cut off contact with that parent, you know. And then how will you feel in that situation? So I think that this really does prepare you for, a scenario that you might find yourself in. Okay, the next section is preparing, no, not preparing, but protecting your children. Okay. If you were abused by one or both of your parents, and you might, um, let me start over. If you were abused by one or both of your parents, and you have any fear that they might also abuse your children, you have the right to refuse to allow them access to your children. If your children still want to see your parent, they may have to do so when they become old enough and mature enough to protect themselves from your parent. Until then, you need to afford them the protection they deserve, no matter how they feel about it. It is painful for everyone concerned to spoil a child's image of his grandparent and to deprive him of having a grandparent. But his safety is far more important. You do not owe your parent opportunity to have a relationship with your child. Some adult children feel it is okay to allow their children to visit their grandparents as long as the visits are carefully supervised. This is especially true when the parent has not been sexually or physically abusive. On the other hand, children may still encounter behaviors that are unacceptable to you, such as being told not to cry, being forced to eat everything on their plates, or being ridiculed, tickled, or teased. In general, if you have had to go to the extreme of divorcing your parent, he is probably not the kind of person you will still want to have influencing your own children. You guys, have y'all heard about my tickle torture story? If you haven't, y'all need to go back and watch that. It's on my YouTube channel. It's Dolores, Delores, the pastor's daughter on YouTube. I have a lot of videos on YouTube, okay? So y'all really need to go and just visit that page. And when you over there, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you will get alerts every time I go live. Facebook doesn't do all that great at alerting you of live videos, and sometimes YouTube is iffy. So make sure you schedule to get alerts on every platform that you follow me or that you're subscribed to. Okay. Um, but yeah, so that tickle torture story actually really got a lot of views and a lot of feedback. I had gotten some emails about it too, and it was something that I even saw my father do to my niece for sure. And it, like, well, like he did that to all the grandkids, but I don't know why. It was like one of my just like she was screaming so loud, and it was just like he just really loved to do that, to just make her scream like super loud. I guess it's because it was so annoying to everybody else who had to hear it. But she would be screaming for him to stop and everything, but he would just continue doing it. So it's like you can see that pattern was, it was just continuing and continuing. Okay. So the next section is when your children pressure you. No matter how much your children pressure you or how much you are criticized by others for depriving your children of their grandparent, remember that it is your responsibility to take control and to make the decisions when it comes to your children's safety. Jill's 9-year-old son, Adam, gave her a hard time because he wanted to see his grandmother. Even though Jill had explained to him in detail why she was divorcing her mother and why she didn't want Adam to see her, he didn't seem to understand and would nag her constantly to let him see his grandmother. Jill would periodically wonder whether she was doing the right thing. After all, her mother had always been good to Adam, and in fact had tended to spoil him, a far cry from her treatment of Jill when Jill was a child. But Jill didn't like the way her mother tried to manipulate her into giving in to Adam's pleas. It just felt like more of her games, and Jill refused to play. She had asked her mother not to call her house anymore, but she would call when Jill wasn't there and talk to Adam, asking him to try to talk his mother into letting him come over. Finally, Jill couldn't stand the pressure any longer. She changed her phone number so that her mother couldn't continue to call. She felt strongly about not having her son see his grandmother, and she didn't want him in the middle any longer. Some children accept their parents' decision better than others do. Anna's two children each reacted differently when she told them that their grandfather had sexually abused her, and that for this reason she didn't want them to see him again while they were still young. Okay, so now we're going to get into Anna's story. Hey, Yassie, how are you? I'm glad you're on this. I missed you. I missed you. I hope you're having a good evening. So this is Anna's story, y'all. Okay, my daughter, who is 12, was very upset but understood. My son, 9, just could not believe that his grandfather was a child molester, and he accused me of making it up. He told me that I couldn't stop him from seeing his grandfather. We had a big fight over it, and he even stopped talking to me for a few days. But I kept at him to, but I kept at him to tell him, oh, excuse me. But I kept at him to tell me about his feelings, and eventually he opened up a little more. I let him know that I understood how he felt and that I was sorry that he was being deprived of his grandfather. But I also let him know that I wasn't going to back down. I asked him to think about what it might do if he were in my shoes, if he were a parent in this situation. He thought long and hard, and finally he conceded that he might do the same thing out of concern for his kids. He let me know, though, that he still loved his grandfather, that when he became an adult, he was going to see him. I told him that I didn't want to take away his love for his grandfather, and that if he still wanted to see him when he was 16, that I would let him. Oh, well, that's a lot of understanding. Yeah, this is Yassie. Oh, you say you miss me too? No. Yeah, this is really these are really great stories. Yeah, I love this book. Like this book is everything. And so is my book, of course. But this book is everything too. Let's put it that way. Okay, so um let me continue reading. It says, you will of course need your spouse to back you up when you tell your children they cannot see their grandparent. Fortunately, most spouses understand their mate's fears that their children will be abused by the grandparent. If your spouse is having a difficult time understanding your fears, he probably needs more education about the cycle of abuse. Have him read books on the subject of child abuse so that he will better understand. If this doesn't work, there may be other reasons why your spouse refuses to support you. It may be that he was abused by his parent and is in denial. In any case, if you encounter an inordinate amount of resistance from your spouse, there are issues between the two of you to work out, perhaps through marriage counseling. Some adult children who have divorced a parent have allowed their children to see their grandparent but have regretted it later. Sometimes the grandparent tries to use the children to manipulate the adult children, or to get back at them. Some children return home from a visit to a grandparent's behaving in a hostile or argumentative manner, a clear reflection of the grandparent's propaganda. Unfortunately, allowing your children to see their grandparent often puts them in the middle. They have heard negative things about their grandparents from you, and at the grandparent's house, they may hear negative things about you. Until your children are mature enough to take care of themselves, you are the only one who can know what is best for them. They may think you are cruel for depriving them of their grandparent. Hold on, I just totally lost my place. Okay. They may think you are cruel for depriving them of their grandparent, but it is far more important for you to protect them from harm than it is to let them do what they want. If you have any fears that your children will be abused by the same person who abused you, you have an obligation as a parent to protect them. In addition, you will be breaking the cycle by not allowing another generation of children to pass on the legacy of abuse that has plagued your family. Y'all gotta break those generational curses. And it just continues. If you give a person an alibi for abuse, then you ultimately, like, you have to give the person who was abused by that person also an alibi for abuse, which means that you just can continue giving people alibis for abuse, never requiring anyone to get well, you know, never actually breaking the cycle. It has to stop. Okay, so the next section is your own worst critic, how to handle the pressures from within. Ooh. Now that's gonna be interesting. Let me see how many more pages it is in this chapter. Lord. No, it's not that many. We can get through it. Okay, your own worst critic, how to handle the pressures from within. In addition to the pressures you will feel from others, you will also experience self-imposed pressure. Feelings of guilt and doubt will plague you from time to time and cause you to question your decision. There will always be pressure from others, and there will always be holidays and perhaps illnesses to stir up the embers of the smoldering guilt. But you don't have to act on your guilt feelings. Excuse me. Acknowledge them, recognize them for what they are. Try to balance them with, oh, excuse me, y'all. You taking a lot of air talking this much. Oh, excuse me. Okay, acknowledge them, recognize them for what they are, try them with some reality, and then let them die out. Don't let your guilt trap you into putting your needs aside in order to take care of a parent who may not even appreciate the gesture. Wow, that's important. Who may not even appreciate the gesture. It's like sometimes and I have this a lot, is like sometimes I feel guilty for things that I don't do. Like, let's say I put this pressure on myself to do some work, and then I don't do it. Like maybe I take a nap instead. then I start feeling guilty. But it's like you put that pressure on yourself to begin with. Like I did this to myself. So I'm basically putting the pressure on myself, then putting the guilt feelings on myself. And it's just like, stop, just stop. And so then when you think about it, you're like, wait a minute, let me stop. Let me stop putting all these pressures on you. And then when you think about you might be putting these pressures on yourself to be around this parent just because you feel guilty from within, and your parent might not even care. So it's like gotta realize that sometimes you do put pressures on yourself. Okay, the next section is the burden of guilt. No matter what your parent has done to you, and no matter how justified you feel in divorcing her, you will undoubtedly feel guilty about doing so. While part of this guilt will come from external pressures, you will also feel guilt from within. The kind of guilt we feel when we don't really think we've done anything wrong, but are afraid we have somehow hurt someone else anyway. As angry as you have been at your parent, as much hate as you sometimes feel toward her, you will always love her. Even if your parent hasn't shown any signs of pain because of the divorce, you may assume she is hurting. You may feel that your parent is too proud to show it or too stubborn to beg, but is nevertheless hurt. Some parents are so clear feelings, however, that they don't allow themselves to feel even the slightest amount of pain over their child's decision to divorce them. Instead, they stay stuck in their pattern of always blaming others or always blaming other people for their problems, staying angry instead of feeling their pain. I feel like that's what my father's doing. I don't think I don't know. I think he cares, but he don't care, you know? So, I don't know. Whatever. Okay, some parents, of course, are hurt by their adult child's decision to divorce them. It is especially difficult to hold your ground if you hear that your parent is taking the divorce hard. After all, you are not used to standing up for yourself in the first place, much less putting your needs ahead of someone else's. The kind of guilt that comes from putting your own needs first for a time can be tremendously difficult to deal with. After a lifetime of taking care of others at the expense of your own well being, knowing that someone else is hurting because of something you did can be overwhelming. But unless you have also heard that your parent has changed tremendously, and unless you have real reason to believe that this is true, resuming the relationship can be a real step backward in terms of your own personal growth. Jazzy, you say you feel me like whatever. Because it's like you would think like, well, how do they feel about it? But whatever. Just gotta do what's best for you. Mm-mm. If you can give yourself some time to adjust to your new way of being, to get used to taking care of your own needs first, you will soon stop feeling guilty for taking care of yourself. Remember, you have given your parent many chances to change. She is responsible for her own actions and inaction. You do not owe her another chance. You certainly do not owe her another opportunity to hurt you again. Part of working through your guilt will be realizing that your parent has a separate life from you and a totally separate identity other than just being your parent. While it seems as though adult children from dysfunctional families should understand this better than most people, surprisingly, they sometimes have the hardest time recognizing this fact. Even though your parent clearly saw herself as more than just your mother, as evidenced by her lack of caring, attention, supervision, or guidance, you may think of her as only in terms of her role as a mother. To counter this, um, to counter this thinking, this is a little typo, I think. To counter this thinking of all the other people, I think that she meant thought. To counter this thought of all the other people and things she put before you in your welfare. A friend's insight helped Chris deal with her feelings of guilt about divorcing her mother. Okay, so now um, we're gonna hear about Chris's story. Okay. Whenever I thought of my mother, I would picture her sitting all alone in her house, watching television to keep her company. I felt so sorry for her, and I felt like such a rat for abandoning her as I did. Then a friend who grew up with me reminded me of how my mother would leave me alone even when I was a little girl so that she could go out with some guy. She said, "Don't you remember that your mother always had a boyfriend? What makes you think she doesn't now?" That brought me to reality that out of my self-imposed guilt. That's good. Okay. Of course, my mother was not alone. She never had been. She wasn't pining away for me. She was going on with her life like I should be doing. Yeah, like really, really. They have lives outside of us. They are not sitting there thinking about all the wrong things that they did to us, right? Like they probably have gone on and don't even really. At least if you find yourself at this position where you're like thinking about divorcing your parent, you're probably like, yeah, they don't care, obviously, because I'm at this decision point. Okay, so I'm gonna continue reading. Another way of working through your guilt is to gain a more realistic picture of just how important you are to your parent. Many adult children underestimate importance to their parent, somehow forgetting just how unimportant they were to them as children. Your parent may have been too busy to help you with your homework or play with you. Perhaps she didn't seem to notice when you were unhappy, ignore symptoms of the sexual abuse you were suffering, or left you with people who abused or neglected you. She may have neglected your needs for affection, proper nutrition, or medical and dental care. In any of these events, you clearly occupied a far less important place in her life than you may be willing to acknowledge. While your parent may indeed be heartbroken because of the divorce, it is also possible that it hasn't had much of an impact on her at all. And as mentioned earlier, some parents are actually relieved at not having to deal with the troublesome child again. That's one way to look at it. That's the one way to look at it. And when you think of it like that, it does take a lot of pressure off of you. Okay. Even if your parent doted on you and made you the center of her life, it is important to remember that she probably didn't do it so much out of love as out of a fear of reaching out to others or a need to control completely. Now that you are not in her life, she is probably being forced to reach out to others um or has found someone else to control. Yeah, yeah, pretty much. The guilt you might feel because you are depriving your children of their grandparent can evoke another internal twinge. In reality, however, it is your parent who is depriving your children of a grandparent, since it is because of his actions that you must keep your children away from him. And while you are facing reality, ask yourself, just what am I depriving my children of? Is it true that your children don't have their grandparent in their lives? But wait a minute. It is true that your children don't have the grandparent in their lives, but they also don't have the negative influence, the abuse, or the criticism. Maintaining family ties for the sake of tradition does not help your children. It is better that your children do not have a grandparent at all than one who might cause them harm. For a good while, holidays will be guilt days. It will be almost impossible for your parents' birthday, Mother's Day, Father's Day, or Christmas to go by without your feeling some guilt because you are not with your parent or haven't sent a card or present. The first Mother's Day that went by without my sending my mother a card was extremely difficult, said Randy, who had divorced his mother a year and a half before. Okay, this is Randy's story, y'all. Let's see what Randy has to say. I felt like such a bad person, such an ungrateful son. This simple act of not sending a card marked a milestone in my recovery, however. I had always sent a card out of obligation or guilt, not out of any genuine feeling of caring. Although I felt some momentary guilt, I got over it quickly when I thought about what Mother's Day is supposed to represent. It is a day set aside to honor your mother for all the wonderful things she has done for you. I realized that I didn't have any of those feelings you're supposed to have toward your mother: gratitude, admiration, respect, and caring. I stopped feeling guilty when I realized that if I had sent a card, it would have been an act of hypocrisy, not a genuine outpouring of affection. Wow. Your parents' birthday can be another time when guilt can overtake you. Carmen always felt especially guilty when her mother's birthday came around. Okay, this is Carmen's story. I felt guilty for years after divorcing my mother for not seeing her, or at least not sending her a present or card. Then last year, I reminded myself of how little my mother had ever done for me and how many of my birthdays she had ruined by getting drunk, making a fool of herself in front of my friends, and berating me in front of them. I remember all the birthdays when I'd end up crying in my room at night, wishing I'd never been born. This year, I didn't feel a bit guilty for not celebrating her birthday, and I made sure my own birthday was the best one I've had. Aww, I like this. Okay. When your parent is sick or dying, many people are discouraged from divorcing a parent because he or she is sick or dying. This was Judy's situation. Okay, this is what Judy said. I wanted to divorce my mother, she told me, but I was afraid she would. You want a baby? Okay. A lot of them. Were they bad? Hmm. Yeah, my husband's telling me about the tornadoes. Has it passed now? Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. I hope y'all are being safe out there. I'm on live still. I hope y'all are being safe out there with these tornadoes. But okay, let me continue reading. We were talking about Judy's situation. She said, I wanted to divorce my mother, she told me, but I was afraid she would die and I would regret having divorced her. She was sick, and she could have died any time. I just couldn't shake my fear of her dying alone. No one deserves that. She pushed everyone else away but me. Judy agonized for several weeks over the decision of whether to divorce her mother. She, like many adult children, was in a painful dilemma, feeling resentful that she couldn't tell her mother exactly how she felt, and guilty for even thinking about divorcing a sick woman. Finally, she decided to divorce her. I couldn't continue to live my life being afraid of how I might feel. If she dies, she dies. On the other hand, she has been sick before and recovered, only to make my life miserable again. She is so tough and mean, she could outlive us all. Because the meanest people seem to live forever. They seem to live forever. Okay. It is almost impossible not to feel some guilt, however fleeting, when your divorced parent is sick or dying. You may blame yourself, it that thinking that is you what? Thinking that if you hadn't divorced him, he wouldn't have gotten so sick, or you may entertain the fantasy of going to see him and therefore bringing on a miraculous cure. I saw a couple of little typos in here, you guys. That's why I stumbled a little bit over some words. But, I know I have a couple of errors in my book too. So, y'all better overlook my errors like I'm overlooking hers. Oh my. It's like sometimes when you write so many words, it's like you're gonna have a typo here and there. Okay. This kind of guilt is what Judith Forrest calls omnipotent guilt. In her book, Necessary Losses, she explains that this kind of guilt rests on the illusion of control, the illusion that we have absolute power over our loved one's well being. If a loved one suffers in any way, we irrationally assume that we are to blame. We tell ourselves that if only we had done something different, we could have prevented his suffering. Vorst recounts an amusing story about a rabbi who pays two condolence calls on the same day to two different families in which elderly women had died. At the first home, the bereaved son told the rabbi, "If only I had sent my mother to Florida and gotten her out of this cold and snow, she would be alive today. It's my fault that she died." At the second house, the bereaved son told the rabbi, "If only I hadn't insisted on my mother going to Florida, she would be alive today. That long airplane ride, the abrupt change of climate, was more than she could take. It's my fault she's dead." That's interesting. The two sons felt guilty, and it was like for the opposite things. Um, this story reflects how much control we would like to believe we have, but in reality, we have no control over our parents' lives. Most of us would rather feel guilty than feel our helplessness. By blaming ourselves, we allow ourselves to continue to believe that we have life controlling powers. Learn to differentiate between real, healthy guilt and neurotic guilt. Healthy guilt occurs when we have violated our own moral code or gone against our own value and belief systems. When we when we do something that we know is morally wrong, the real guilt we feel serves as a way of discouraging us from doing it again. Real guilt is appropriate to the deed, causing us to feel remorse but not self-hatred. Neurotic guilt, on the other hand, is hold on, I gotta sneeze. Excuse me. Ooh, I don't know where that came from. I usually sneeze in threes. Do y'all sneeze in threes? Do y'all sneeze in threes? I sneeze in threes. This is weird, but tonight I only sneezed twice. Okay, where am I? Neurotic guilt, on the other hand, is usually excessive and misplaced. It can be a way of avoiding your helplessness and powerlessness, as mentioned above, or it can be a byproduct of your childhood abuse. Victims of child abuse often feel guilty, ugly, and dirty inside. This feeling of badness can rear its ugly head whenever you do something that hurts someone else, even if that person deserves it, or you are just taking care of yourself. Let's see, my father would put this type of pressure on me to make me think that I had type of control, like the control to save the church, the control to, make him be better, be a good pastor, make him be a better, like it was just like he put all of this pressure on me, which I felt like he's trying to create me into a narcissist. Like he's trying to make me be a narcissist because a narcissist would think that they have that much control that even their presence is what changes the situation. And it's just, no, no, it's not you. Like you don't have to control everything. That's creating a different type of pathology. Remind yourself that you are not divorcing your parent in order to hurt him. If he is hurt as a consequence of your taking care of yourself, you can't help it. It doesn't make you a bad person. Whatever parent after you divorce him will not be your responsibility or your fault. Neurotic guilt can also be caused by the withholding of anger that should have, but could not have, been directed towards your parent when you were a child. If you have not released enough of your repressed anger toward for the way he has damaged you, you may end up turning that anger back on yourself. Victims often direct their anger against themselves in the form of guilt. Wow, that's deep. That even guilt is a form of directing anger at yourself. Wow, I don't think I've ever thought of it that way. Okay. What about y'all? Have you ever thought of it that way? That's enlightening. Okay. Adding to your will be that imposed upon you by the rest of your family. Often your other parent or your siblings will use guilt to try to pressure you into changing your mind or into visiting your parent. Even though it may be against your better judgment, you may decide to go ahead and see your parent, especially if there is a possibility that he will die soon. If you go if you do break down and visit your parent, make sure that you take care of yourself in the process and pay attention to your reactions and your feelings while in your ailing parent's presence. They will tell you a lot about your parent, yourself, and whether or not you want to visit them again. See, I like how she gives you grace. And it's not like she doesn't say, well, you shouldn't go visit them. It's not really a matter of that. It's a matter of, look, if you're going to do that, whatever decision you make, you need to make sure that you're keeping yourself in mind and that your health and your safety and um, your mental health and all of that is important. Okay, let me continue reading. Charlene divorced her father 3 years ago and had little or no guilt about having any contact with him. Then last month, her sister called to tell her that her father had a heart attack and was in intensive care. Charlene agonized for days about whether or not she should go see him. We talked about what her motivation would be to see him, and she acknowledged that it was guilt. We also talked about what she was afraid of and what the possible consequences might be if she did see him. She had divorced her mother at the same time she had divorced her father, and she didn't want to have to deal with both of them at the same time. One of her biggest concerns was running into her mother or her other sister, both of whom were very abusive. Charlene made the decision to go see her father, but to stay for only a few minutes and leave if her mother or sister were there. Excuse me. When she arrived, she was relieved to see that her father was alone, but alarmed to see how terrible he looked. Hooked up to a life support system, he hardly looked anything like like she had remembered. They spoke briefly, mostly about how he felt, and then there was nothing else to say. Charlene felt so sorry for him, and she even felt some sadness as she got up to say goodbye, knowing that it probably would be the last time she ever saw him alive. What was so surprising to Charlene was that seeing her father again wasn't as traumatic as she had imagined it would be. She realized that she had done a lot of growing in the intervening 3 years, and she was no longer afraid of her father. Granted, he was sick, but that had never stopped him in the past from lashing out at her. She had known ahead of time that she was going to take care of herself, whatever that meant. If he had become verbally abusive, she knew that she would have had the strength to just get up and leave. She knew she would stay only as long as she wanted to and not get caught up in any arguing. Charlene was glad she had seen her father, but she realized that she had no interest in seeing him again or in helping to take care of him. When her sister tried pressuring her to see him again, When her sister tried pressuring her to see him again, she was able to tell her no without feeling 1 ounce of guilt. Charlene had truly divorced herself from her father. She cared about him, but could remain objective about him and not get hooked back into a negative relationship with him. Even though she had succumbed to internal and external pressures, she knew that her own welfare came first. Many adult children have experienced similar to Charlene's when a parent becomes sick. Nicole's experience with her ailing father was entirely different. Now we're about to get into Nicole's experience. Then we're almost done, y'all. It's like 2 more pages. Okay, so Nicole's father was sick, and this is what happened. Even from his sick bed, my father wreaked havoc with my life. He would complain about me to my mother and sisters until they would call me, telling me what a terrible daughter I was for treating my father so poorly. And he was constantly trying to turn my sisters against me by telling them that I had said bad things about them behind their backs. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and I divorced him. Even though he was terribly sick, I had to take care of myself and put an end to his reign of terror. So being sick, and this it says being sick didn't stop Mary from divorcing her father, and thus forcing her to divorce him as well. Oh wow. So so Mary's father was sick and he divorced her while he was sick. Okay, so let's hear about this. This is gonna be interesting. When my father was in the hospital, he made my life and everyone else's a living hell. He complained to the nurses and doctors constantly, and they in turn would complain to me. He had always been rather paranoid, always saying that people were against him, but it seemed to get worse as he got older. He started suspecting that I was trying to kill him. The last straw was when he left instructions with the nurses that I'd not be allowed to see him I was giving because I was giving him drugs to kill him. Fortunately, the nurses didn't believe him, but they did have to follow his instructions. Yeah. So not only was he saying that, but it could have gotten her into trouble. Like, like him accusing her of giving him drugs. Y'all, hold on a second. I need to go get a piece of tissue. This is interesting. 'Cause it gives you like different perspectives too, because you think, okay, well, I can't do this to my parent because they're sick, but then you have sick parents that do that while they're sick. So it puts things in perspective for you for sure. Okay. Some adult children who divorced a parent who has subsequently died feel responsible for the death. If your last contact with your parent was a divorce declaration or an argument of some kind, you may have a tendency to chastise yourself or not for not being more understanding and forgiving, or worse yet, to blame yourself for your parent's death. If this happens to you, remember the story the rabbi told and remember to differentiate between real and neurotic guilt. On the other hand, if the adult child has successfully divorced the parent and completed the grieving process prior to the parent's death, there is seldom any guilt or, for that matter, pain. In a in case a case in point is B.D. Hyman, um, daughter of the late Betty Davis. So BD, you guys know I have a little dyslexia. BD divorced her mother 5 years before Davis's death, shortly after having written a book called My Mother's Keeper, which revealed how cruel her mother had been to her. In an interview just after her mother's death, she was asked, "Do you feel a loss?" Beatty answered, "No, because she hasn't been a part of my life for the past 5 years. You have to have had something before you can feel a loss." Oh, whoa. Okay. So that's deep, y'all. So this last section of this chapter, and it's chapter 5, this last section is called recurrent doubts. And I haven't read this yet, so I would just imagine that this is a process that is ongoing. That there will be times that you would feel the ways that those doubts will creep back up, even when you least expect them. So let's just see what she says about it. No matter how carefully you worked on your decision-making process and how right your decision to divorce may have seemed at the time, every now and then you will doubt your decision. Perhaps you may have been caught off guard because of some unexpected contact with your divorced parent, or you have seen something on television that reminds you of her, or you suddenly miss her for no apparent reason. Then the doubting will begin. Maybe I was too hasty in my decision. Maybe I should give her one more chance, or maybe I am too critical, or maybe I expect too much. Maybe she has changed. I regret it if she dies and I never see her again. This internal questioning is normal and should be expected, but it will usually pass if you give it some time. Whether your doubting is motivated by external pressures or by internal pressures, such as guilt or loneliness, remember that you wouldn't have gotten this far or wouldn't have had to take such an extreme measure unless you had had a good reason. Um, go back Go back over your reasons for wanting to divorce your parent as a reminder that you made the right decision in the first place. In addition, reread part one of this book to refresh your memory and build up on your resolve. If you are still tempted to resume the relationship, note the following. Okay, now these are a couple of things that she wants you to note. Okay, number one is your attempt to reconcile with your parent may be just an avoidance of your pain or loneliness or need to work on yourself. So you might be avoiding some things, and maybe that's why you're like, I'll just see him again because maybe that at the time feels easier than working on yourself. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, here's the second reason, the second thing to consider. Sometimes adult children from dysfunctional families have such an extreme need to be fair that they put aside their own needs. Yeah. And that's why I think that that whole inner child, remember I was talking about the inner child grieving and all of that stuff. And sometimes if you consider what that other person, you overly consider what that person had been through, like the abuse that they experienced, the whole hurt people stuff, um, everybody should be forgiven because you've been that whole thing can make you push aside your own needs and give in to seeing that parent again. But then if you, like she said, if you find yourself in that position, you where you make contact again, then you have some things that you should consider in taking care of yourself. So here's another thing that she says to consider. If your parent could not love and appreciate you when you were a little child, how is she going to be able to love you now? Hmm, good question. And then lastly, if you are an adult child of abusive parents, it may not be your love, but your refusal to grow up that keeps you tied to your parents. Ooh, now that's something to consider too. That maybe you want to stay in a child's place, like you're stuck in that place. And maybe growing up means that you have to step out on your own. You're tied to them because maybe they're taking care of something. Maybe they're paying your bills. Maybe, you know, maybe a lot of things. And sometimes you have to grow up and, leave the nest and fly solo. And I know that can be scary, but it's necessary. Okay, here are the last few paragraphs of this chapter. If you find after some time has passed that you genuinely feel you want to try one more time with your parent, then perhaps you will need to do so. Before you attempt a reconciliation, however, make sure you read the last chapter in this book, which discusses reconciliation and how to go about it. It takes a lot of strength to withstand both the external and internal pressures to not give in. Take what seems like um, Taking what seems like an easier path, but you are not just the victim of a dysfunctional family and abusive parents. You are also a survivor. You have the strength, determination, and courage to withstand any pressure if you keep in mind that you deserve a happy, fulfilling, and healthy life. You've worked so hard to get where you are. Don't give up now. Armed with all the preceding warnings, all of your preparation, and realistic expectations, the only thing left for you to do is go through with the divorce process itself. Woo. Okay, y'all. We're there. We're at that step. So that was the end of chapter 5, which was talking about making the final making the final, making the divorce final, telling your family, telling your kids, um, you know, dealing with the internal and external criticisms that come up, how to, go about handling that when they do come up, how to take care of yourself if you do decide to resume contact, or, this is really good. I feel like this is a really, really good book, you guys. I can't stress that enough. But I'm going to try, though. I'm going to try to keep expressing it. But anyway, so tomorrow we're going to get into divorcing without a lawyer and the mechanics of divorce. That's chapter 6. And yeah, so we're steady making progress. Yeah, how do y'all feel so far? Like, if you're going through these steps with me, where are you in the process? Do you feel like, you want to reconcile? Do you feel like you're still moving forward? Where are you in the process? Do you feel like a divorce is necessary, a temporary separation, you know, just some time apart to kind of get some thoughts together, some therapy maybe? Where are you in this process, and where is your mindset right now? Mine is, I feel like this is confirmation. I feel like this is really, really good confirmation, and I say good confirmation because I've been doing the work, and it's good confirmation that I've been taking the necessary steps. And I can say that highlighting these steps, makes me feel more comfortable about moving forward in my decision to divorce my father. So, oh, maybe you feel the same way, or maybe you feel the opposite way. Either way, let me know. Let me know, baby. And I'm gonna get off of here. It's been almost 2 hours. So we're doing good, you guys. I think this was less time than yesterday. Because chapter four was not that long, but those, like 1 through 3, those chapters were pretty long. I had to break up a couple of them. Um, but yeah, so I'm excited, you guys. I'm excited that um that we're doing this work, and taking the necessary steps to make informed decisions, but healing decisions at the same time, And then just to reiterate, please join my mailing list, which is in the description, and also the link to purchase your digital download of my book, Provoked. Um, and it's the first book in the memoir series, The Pastor's Daughter. Okay, so The Pastor's Daughter is the memoir series, and this first book is called Provoked. So, I'm excited about it. I think that you guys will hear a lot of parallels between this divorcing a parent book and a lot of the stories that I tell within my book. And so it'll start to really make sense, how and why I got to this decision point. But I love y'all, and yeah, and I hope that you have a wonderful night. If you're hearing this in the daytime, I hope that you have a wonderful, blessed, and prosperous day. Okay. And you are important to me. I need you to survive. All right, you guys. I love you. Bye bye for now.